A 2020 Calamity Christmas. There are so many things that could be said of this year. A pandemic, social tension, masks, vaccines, elections. Fortunately for you and me, we don't have time to talk about those things. No, instead, for our purposes, we will turn our attention to someone you've likely never met, but almost certainly have many things in common with. Our story involves a young man named Neville Everyman, who lives right here in Fort Worth. Like all of us, Neville has been adversely impacted by this very complicated year, and he wants nothing more than to end 2020 with some Christmas joy. With the holiday approaching and family set to arrive to celebrate with him, Neville begins making preparations for a Christmas that no one will forget. Every Christmas season must begin with decorations. Most years, Neville was committed to waiting until after Thanksgiving to begin the festivities, but this year wore on him a little heavier, and he wanted some brightness to cheer him up. Of course, we won't talk about this with anyone. This is a sensitive matter, a touchy subject to be sure. It makes people mad, and Christmas is meant to bring joy, not anger. Neville spent a long time decorating his brand new, beautiful Douglas fir tree that he handpicked himself. He wasn't sure exactly how long it took him, but he definitely listened to Michael Bublé's Christmas album at least 3 times through, plus some other classics as well. When it was done, it was marvelous, a spectacle, a gleaming beacon of hope, a magnificent display of, well, you get the picture. It was truly beautiful. My work here is done for the evening, Neville thought to himself. Time to get some sleep. And slept he did, that is, until about 3 a.m., when he heard a terrible crashing sound coming from his living room. Followed by his dog, a boxer named Melvin, barking burglars, he thought in a frenzy. Half awake, he stumbled down the hall with his already chambered Glock 19 in his hand because, well, this is the South after all. However, to his surprise, there were no burglars at all. Only what was once a magnificently decorated Douglas fir that was now face first on the ground, surrounded by an audience of broken ornaments and a very guilty-looking Melvin cowering behind the couch. This is not how this was supposed to go, Neville thought. Tired and in despair, he didn't even attempt to clean anything up that night. It can wait, he murmured. The next morning, a kind of calm resolve came over Neville. I won't let this get me down, he thought. His tree was less than pleasant looking, but it didn't matter. To offset this little accident, he determined to make it up with perfect gifts for each his family members. If the tree isn't the best looking, the presents will be, he exclaimed. Now, I won't lie. This year had been difficult for Neville. Money was a little hard to come by. Because of the coronavirus, he couldn't work nearly as much as he had in years before. He had been scraping along, however, for several months, saving everything he could. Not even this stupid virus will stop me from getting the perfect gifts for my people. He searched high and low on every website he could conjure, trying to find the perfect gift for each of his loved ones that he could actually afford. He ended up settling with gifts that were not his first pick. He didn't really have much of a choice. This will have to do, I suppose, he thought. Again, to compensate for gifts that he didn't necessarily love, he thought, I'll wrap them better than any gift my family will receive. Now, Neville was a lot of things, but an artist he was not. He really tried, and he did the best he could, but his best was, well, you'll see. At least they were uniquely wrapped. The next day, Neville began his next Christmas project. Who doesn't love a gingerbread house, he said to himself. Now, usually, he would have just settled with the instructions that came with one of those packaged gingerbread house kits, but this year needed to be special. So he took it upon himself to bake some gingerbread from a Pinterest recipe he found, and he had drawn out blueprints of his very own custom gingerbread house. Go big or go home, he thought, while rubbing his hands together. Hours passed. The bread was cool enough to work with, and Neville began building his confectionery mansion. But the same trouble that had been plaguing him since he started decorating his tree met him here as well. The more he piled onto his masterpiece, the more it caved in. Defeated and deflated, he sat back in his chair and picked a piece off the house to eat. It may not be pretty, but at least it's delicious. Except it wasn't. Somewhere between trying to find the right measure cups and the flour package tearing, Neville accidentally grabbed the salt container instead of the sugar. Things just kept getting worse and worse. Go figure, he muttered. Christmas Eve had finally arrived. Things were not going nearly as well as Neville imagined them, but it didn't matter. A broken tree, creatively wrapped gifts, and a caved-in and oversalted gingerbread house wouldn't break Neville's Christmas spirit. His family would arrive this afternoon, and all would be well. Neville was more confident at cooking than almost anything else he did, which is why that whole salt in place of sugar fiasco was so damaging to his ego. The mistakes he made baking would not be repeated with the turkey. He didn't just settle for a store-bought, pre-brined bird either. Neville was fortunate enough to be friends with a lovely couple that he attended church with that had recently moved to their very own farm in Minnesota. And they sold him a farm-fresh turkey right off their land. He brined it with the most exquisite kinds of herbs and flavors yesterday, and now it was time to show off his culinary wizardry. Low and slow, that's how he planned to smoke it. A low temperature for a long time. He loaded it on his smoker, got the fire going, and walked away to begin prepping the house for his arriving guests. He'll never know exactly what happened on this day. Maybe the wood he loaded in the smoker had some kind of accelerant residue on it, or maybe there were leaves in the fire pit, or maybe the smoker was infected with the same bad luck that all of 2020 had suffered from. But the temperature was anything but low. After a couple of hours of raging heat, he went out to check on his beautiful bird, and well, he couldn't even call it Cajun. It was so blackened and charred that it was totally inedible. There was not enough time to make another turkey. He did have some chicken that he could cook, but he was so dejected he didn't want to do anything. At least my family is driving in soon, and they are bringing a lot of great food that will just need to be warmed up. That was the one silver lining. His mom always made the best food over the holidays. The phone rang just as he was cleaning up the ashes of what was once a turkey. "Hello," he answered. "Neville, it's Mom. Merry Christmas, dear." He was excited to hear her voice. "You must be close," he said with anticipation. "Actually, sweetheart, that's why I'm calling. We've had a terrible snowstorm since yesterday, and our phones and power have been down. We are still stuck in town, and it doesn't look like we will be getting out anytime soon. We can try to come down in a few days when the snow clears if you'd still like to have us over, but I'm afraid we won't make it this evening." In a few days, he thought. You can't celebrate Christmas after Christmas. It just isn't the same. "I understand, Mom. It's not your fault. I love you and I miss y'all. Hope to see you in a few days." Everything had gone wrong. A broken tree, less than great gifts, failed baking, failed cooking, and now the people he loved the most and the only thing he was really excited about weren't coming either. "What a year," he said under his breath. He wasn't really hungry, so he decided to put on his coat and take a walk. He was very sad, a little angry, and completely unmotivated. It was already getting dark at this point, as it does during winter, and the streets of his neighborhood were extra dark. Maybe the city hadn't synced the streetlights to match the earlier sunset, or maybe his mood was affecting the way he saw everything. As he was passing by his local church, he noticed candles through the window. They were so bright and warm-looking, he found himself walking towards the window until he got right up close to it. In fact, so close his breath began to fog the window in front of him. He remembered a Bible study he recently attended through the Gospel of John. He couldn't remember the chapter or verse, but he remembered Jesus saying, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." He smiled. It was a good reminder to him. All of his Christmas problems were really pretty small in the grand scheme of things, and the reminder of Jesus' light shining into the darkness was just what he needed. He glanced over his right shoulder and saw that the church had also put out a nativity scene, and so he began walking over to it to look upon the baby in the manger with a thankful heart. As he approached the scene, he slowed his pace. He really did love the Lord, and he wanted to, for a moment, put himself in that scene where Jesus was born, to imagine what it must have been like. As he got closer to the manger, the magic wore off, and the reminder of the curse of 2020 took center stage once again. The baby was gone. Are you kidding me? Who took the baby? Who would do such a thing? He was absolutely irate. Just as he began to turn around, he heard a voice. "I know where the baby is." He turned to find one of the groundskeepers of the church standing there. "It's in the storage shed, still in the box it came in." Neville was a little confused. "Why? Why didn't you put the baby Jesus in the manger?" The groundskeeper answered, "This year we wanted to do things a little differently. We wanted people to see the empty manger and be reminded that Jesus' story is about much more than his birth. He was born of a virgin, but he grew up. He lived a perfect life. He died on a cross, and he lived again. The manger and the tomb are both empty because Jesus is on neither of them. He's on his throne, which is where we want him to be in such a crazy year." Neville smiled. This was not how he imagined a manger scene should be set up. But then again, this is not how he imagined his tree, his gifts, his gingerbread house, his turkey, or his family going either. He didn't imagine the whole year to go the way it did, and yet here he was. This was an odd nativity scene, but maybe it was the perfect nativity scene. Jesus in a manger is precious. Jesus on the cross is gut-wrenching, but Jesus on the throne, that is the perfect reminder for such a Calamity Christmas. "Thanks," Neville said to the groundskeeper. "For what?" he replied. "For reminding me of what matters." And as he walked home, he thought, this may be the most memorable Christmas yet.